welcome back to Focus Atlanta. And this segment, I want to talk a little about your flu season preparation.
My name is Dr. Seema Lakdawala. I am an associate professor at Emory University in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, and I study influenza viruses and how they transmit through the air from person to person. Similar to SARS-2 or COVID-19, we know that influenza viruses can transmit long range with small aerosols. They can also transmit short range with larger droplets. They can transmit through contaminated surfaces and through direct contact. All of these modes are possible and can lead to an infection. Looking sort of historically at the past 10 years, we know that the annual burden of influenza is somewhere around 40 million infections a year. About 10% of those people will seek out some sort of medical visit, going to their pediatrician or a urgent care, and 10% of those individuals that seek medical assistance will become hospitalized. And 10% of that, somewhere around 25,000 people a year, will eventually die because of complications associated with the virus. So that's our annual burden of just seasonal influenza viruses. Those numbers can change, if there was like a new pandemic that emerges. Transmission or spread of COVID isn't excluding or causing interference between transmission of other pathogens. As has been sort of proposed, we know that all of them can co-circulate. What we aren't seeing are individual people infected with multiple pathogens, right? We aren't having people that are infected with COVID and flu and RSV. How they're influencing each other is probably because we have all removed our masks. We're all back in school, kids are in school, we're at work, people are traveling again, probably to similar levels as we traveled pre-pandemic or maybe even more. And there's an appetite to come back to some sort of normalcy. And in that vein, what happens is when we're all together in tight spaces, interacting, and there is an individual who's sick, transmission can happen and can occur fairly efficiently, especially because we haven't been having immunity against these pathogens that we would normally see seasonally. What we know so far is that there have been about 14 pediatric deaths from influenza already. We are way above our normal range for the past 11 years since we've been tracking flu. We've been tracking it for longer than that. But normally we see peaks of influenza in January and February. We are well above that. We used to have a very early season. About 9% of deaths right now are from complications associated with respiratory illnesses, either COVID or influenza. And so there is a lot of public health burden already associated this season. We're not seeing a drop-off. We're definitely seeing continued increase of cases each week. The CDC is a couple weeks behind, looking at the case numbers from Thanksgiving, right around November 26th, you see the vast majority of the US is in a very high influenza zone, which means that the predominant, more than 25% of people being tested for influenza, respiratory illnesses are positive. The other thing we expect is, given travel increasing for the holidays, that there's likely to continue to be transmission of these pathogens. One thing we learned during the COVID-19 pandemic is how to mitigate flu transmission. It was a drastic surprise, I think, for many of us, the absolute absence of influenza during COVID-19 pandemic when interventions were in play. What that means is that we have the tools to reduce the transmission of this virus already in hand. And some of those are increasing your ventilation when you're at home or in buildings, hospitals, schools, to reduce long-range transmission. You can also put on a mask to reduce short-range transmission. And staying home when you're sick. You are all very acutely aware of when we have any sort of respiratory illnesses now. And staying home at the sign of a tickle in your throat and sneezing and coughing and feverish feelings is probably a good idea to reduce the spread of these respiratory viruses in the community. In addition, getting vaccinated is a really good way to boost your immunity against what's circulating right now. What's most important is that we remember that we have tools that can mitigate transmission of influenza already within our reach. We proved that we can do this the past 2 years. We just have to have the appetite to continue to do that. And that really comes down to being mindful, not being afraid to wear a mask again, and being thoughtful in our ventilation and the spaces that we attend.
Thanks for watching this segment of Focus Atlanta. We'll be right back with more.